When we say that our culture is totally preoccupied with rational thought and purposeful doing, then this doesn't make a lot of sense to us, naturally enough, because we're part of that culture. We have a blind spot, and the blind spot prevents us from making sense of that idea. And the idea is that we overvalue being smart and doing. So if we're very good at being smart, that's considered to be a great thing. And if we're brilliant at doing, that's also a great thing. So it's all about being smart and doing. Doing in the sense of achieving stated goals rather than random doing or whatever other type of doing. So because of our blind spot, we're quite likely to say, well, what's all that about? What else is there when it comes to human beings? What else are we looking for? What else is there to value ourselves on? And we really can't see, or we probably can't see, that there is anything else that needs to be valued. But then when we go into it a bit, the blind spot becomes obvious. It's like we've missed something really, really big. And in the normal way of seeing things that we have, we never see this thing at all. But we're caught up in the adoration of purposeful doing and rational thought, which is not a good thing to get caught up in because it's divorced from reality, really. So all we need to do is consider what things are there about human beings that are important or that are properly characteristic of human beings, that have nothing to do with cleverness or doing. Because, as I've just said, the prejudice is to think that without any doing, what would we do? What would people do? The idea is that, well, we just sit there like dummies. We would have no life. We'd kind of vegetate. We would be aimless, rudderless, poor sad creatures with no meaning in our lives, just drifting, just surviving. That is the prejudice, to think that's what we would be like. But then when we come back to considering that question as to what other aspects are there to being a human, we can think of lots of aspects that when we think of them we realize, yeah, that's important, wouldn't want to be without that have nothing to do with purposeful doing, that we don't do on purpose. So one very simple example is smiling. Now, of course, we can smile on purpose, but when you smile on purpose, it's not really a smile, is it? It's a grimace. It's a kind of a meaningless thing. A true smile happens. It is not done. And when we smile at someone or someone smiles at us, that's, in other words, it's a genuine thing. It's a sincere thing, and that's why it's makes us feel good, because it is genuine. It's not part of our social mask. Obviously, everything about our social mask is purposeful. Otherwise, it couldn't be a mask. In order to be a mask, it has to be under our control. So if we can imagine this domain of everything that is part of our mask, it's all capable of being tweaked. It's all under our control. It's all insincere. Naturally enough, we all know that. But what we don't tend to dwell upon is how much of our energy do we put into the mask, and how much do we neglect or not value what isn't the mask. Another thing that we don't do on purpose is being kind. Nobody can be kind on purpose. You can pretend to be kind and go through the motions of being kind, but it's very cold. It's only skin deep. Kindness happens again. No one does kindness. So kindness, compassion, warmth, human warmth, all of these are non-purposeful. So all we have to do is think about a world full of humans, but with no human warmth, where everyone's doing what they're doing, being smart, trying to achieve their goals, etc., etc. But there's absolutely no warmth in it. What a terrible thought. And no doubt we've all had experiences of situations which kind of verge upon that. So if you just, that one thing, human warmth, if you just take that out of the picture straight away, it changes everything completely. Everything becomes a kind of a surreal nightmare, really. And then we could go on and list related things such as empathy, which is closely related, the ability to listen. Nobody listens on purpose because the purposefulness is a block, or everything has to be dropped. So listening is, I stop projecting my stuff onto you, and then I can listen to you. When I'm projecting my stuff onto you, my ideas, my frameworks, that's purposeful doing, albeit unconscious purposeful doing. But it blocks communication. So communication can only take place really when there's no projection going on. Therefore it's a negative thing, it's not a doing. It's when I stop all my doing, which is far more valuable, even though doing is very valuable. If we do all the time and don't do anything else but doing, we become inhuman. We become mechanisms, and pointless mechanisms, because our doing is only meaningful when it's embedded in not doing, as the mystics have often said. And as it says in the metaphysics of martial arts, the best, most effective action comes out of stillness. It doesn't come out of a context of action or agitation. It comes out of perfect quiet or perfect stillness, which is not doing. So as long as the not doing is there, we can have doing, and that doing will be effective. It will do what it's supposed to do, if that's at all possible. But straight away when we say that, we can see that that's putting things in the proper order. First, our natural, innate, spontaneous nature, and then the doing, the purposeful doing, or the thinking. And then coming back to the list again, we could say other things, such as creativity. Creativity is not a doing, because doing really means copying. It means copying all the ideas and assumptions and beliefs and stuff that I got into my head. I rearrange them and I copy the template that is there in me and reproduce it. So all purposeful doing is copying of a template. And it's copying of a template because I'm in charge. I'm organizing the show. In creativity, as everyone knows, we're not in charge. We let ourselves become channels for something that we ourselves didn't logically stipulate or come up with. So that's the difference between a good writer and a bad writer. A good writer's writing stuff that's new, and the writing is happening through them. A bad writer is writing according to a formula, and it's all old stuff. and they're clever enough to be able to rejig all the tired old formulae and rearrange them and reshuffle the deck and put them all back together again, and there you've got another best-selling novel. So that isn't to say that the second type of writer, the type of writer who is strictly formulaic, won't be very successful, because sometimes they can be, as we know. But it's not writing, it's just trickery. And another way which we can have to kind of focus on this question of is doing and thinking overvalued? Are they overvalued? Would be to try to imagine, which people sometimes do, that you're going to be kept captive in a small room for a year or two, for whatever reason. It does happen sometimes. And you can choose your companions. So you have, say, 4 companions that you can name, and they can be companions from the whole of human history. We can magically make them be alive again for the sake of this exercise. So then everyone sits around and thinks about who they'd like to have in the room with them for a year or two. Someone that wouldn't drive them daft, obviously, or bore them senseless, or just be disagreeable. So one thing we might tend to do is think, people who are action heroes have done great things. Maybe they would be good because they're so inspirational, as everyone knows. Or fantastic thinkers who have thought of amazing stuff, and they could keep us interested with all their amazing thoughts. And when we think throughout history, we might think of the greats, the real greats, because we think, they could have taught us something. We could share a space with Napoleon and Alexander the Great. We'd have to be able to speak French and Macedonian or Greek, whatever it was, obviously, but that's taken for granted, so we can think of it that way. And another thing that people sometimes say is someone who's incredibly funny, some great stand-up comedian of our time, or some other time. Not that there were very many stand-up comedians, maybe, going back too far, since it wasn't a profession, I don't think. But in that case, we're having this fantasy that we'll just be rolling around laughing at their hilarious jokes the whole time. But then this is what we think of to start off with, and if we're smart, we kind of think, hang on, maybe none of that's too good, because funny people aren't funny the whole time, as everyone knows, in their private lives, as everyone also knows. They can be deeply unhappy or miserable or cantankerous, all sorts of things. And the same thing goes for people of action heroes. Now, they are great at doing whatever it is they're great at doing, whether it's climbing a mountain or excelling in some sport or something like that. But does that mean that they're good to hang around with on their off time when they're not doing those things? And obviously they can't climb mountains or excel in sports when they're locked up in a room with you for a year or two. So that gets us thinking, and we think, well, they might be complete bastards to be with. Their personalities may not have developed at all in terms of their maturity, in terms of, are they okay to hang around with, or are they just good at what they're doing and what they're celebrated for doing, but the rest of their psyche is completely undeveloped, the rest of their personality is undeveloped. And of course, if we think like this, we'll start realizing that's probably true. Because if it so happens that I do really well in one very narrow field, I'll put all my energy into that in order to get recognized even more and neglect everything else about me. probably. If I have a huge gift in mathematics, I'll probably put all my focus in mathematics, which is great for mathematics, but there's more to life than maths. So then we get to thinking, and to cut to the chase, really, because I'm going on a bit here. What we really, if we could get to the heart of it, are looking for in this kind of scenario is someone who's good at being, that they are able to be, because there's pretty much the most of what you can do in these captive situations is to be. So whoever is sitting around good at being, and being, that just means you're peaceful and you have presence and you're companionable. You're present in yourself and you're not trying to achieve stuff the whole time, which is no good. It's the same as trying to prove yourself the whole time. You want someone who's not trying to prove themselves the whole time and win arguments and prove that they're great or anything like that. Even if they are great, it doesn't matter. There's no consolation to be stuck in a room with someone who's great. So what? You get pretty fed up after a couple of weeks. And after a couple of months or years, you really are fed up because the greatness doesn't matter a damn to you. Or beauty, you could say the same for beauty. We obviously idealize beauty, but it won't sustain a relationship, really, obviously. So that becomes a matter of no consequence very quickly, within a few weeks or those days, months. So there is this other human quality, which is just to spontaneously and naturally be who you are. And in India, it's a common thing if someone does have this ability to be, for other people to come and sit in the same room as them, without talking, without seeking guidance or spiritual teachings or anything, just to be in their presence, really. So that's what they call darshan. Now, you can't do darshan with somebody who's no good at being, because it's pointless. Now, if you could be in a year, you spend a year in a room with some people who are very good at being, not that they are good at it, it's not like their ego has this ability to be, but you know what I mean, then that would be truly beneficial and you wouldn't get irritated with them, and you might even develop the being aspect of yourself more as a result, because it's catching when other people be. That gives us permission to be. They're not competing, they're not trying to improve shit the whole time. So what that story shows is that by exalting doing, purposeful doing and thinking, you've completely forgotten about being. So we're all about the doing and not about the being. And yet when we are reminded of that, it's kind of like, well, yeah, maybe that is kind of important after all. Because when you get someone who's brilliant at doing but has no being, that's not a good situation. You really are a mechanism in that case. And not just a mechanism, because you're not a useful mechanism that's serving a purpose. You're a mechanism that's gone wild, it's gone walkabout. It's like a big lorry going down the street and there's no driver in it. That's what it's like when it's all doing and no being, because the being is the driver. So in this world of ours, we're all about creating essentially mechanisms, driverless mechanisms with no wisdom or being behind it. And that might seem like a fairly harsh criticism to level at Western culture. It is a harsh criticism. In all fairness, it is a harsh criticism. But it is entirely warranted. all we need to do is think about the amount of time we spend talking about experts and enthusing about experts. Experts this, experts that, experts have shown, experts have proved, etc., etc., etc. Experts are people who are very good at thinking in a particular very narrow range, obviously. So experts have taken the place of wise people in our culture. We never read wise people say this, wise people say that, basically because it isn't a category for us anymore. There is no valuation of wisdom in our society. And certainly by developing ourselves in the way that the social system provides for us to develop ourselves, school, college, university, etc., etc., none of that results in an increase in wisdom. All of that results in an increase in narrowness and specificity, which is dangerous because you know an awful lot about a little bit, but beyond that you're even more ignorant than the average person, probably, because you've overvalued the little thing that you do know. So here we are in this fantastic situation where we absolutely don't value wisdom. And yet in all the traditional countries, wisdom is irreplaceable. There's nothing like it, really. You can't really replace it with anything. You can't replace it with experts or YouTube tutorials or books or anything like that. It's irreplaceable. And it's very, very hard to... The process of becoming wise is a very difficult and arduous and long process. So the fruit of that process is valuable, not just for the person, but for everyone around them. So the proper development or growth of human beings results in human beings that are wise and kind. And going back to the list of other aspects or attributes that I was talking about earlier, that is absolutely the case, and you'd be a fool to argue otherwise, that our society doesn't give a damn for any of those things. It really, really doesn't. And so our mental health has suffered as a result. So on the small scale of the individual, our mental health is affected. And on the big scale of society itself and what it's doing, where it's going, that's pathological as well. And all of that is the result of us overvaluing purposeful doing and rational thinking. Okay, thanks for watching.